Hello, Lisa.
Hi.
How are you doing today?
Pretty good. How about you?
I'm tired.
Same.
All right, let's get to it. So we're going to talk about the dot-com boom and bust,
And bust.
which happened around what time?
The boom was towards the end of the 90s, and the bust, people have different dates for when it actually busted. Around my recollection is really around 2001 for the industry that I was in, but some of it did happen earlier.
So, where were you working or living during those times?
In 1998, I was living in Stamford, Connecticut, very close to the New York metropolitan area, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, the tri-state area. And I was working for the founder and CEO of Priceline.com.
Okay, that's awesome. So it must have been an awesome experience.
It was a crazy kind of chaotic energy around that time, but it was fascinating.
So let's talk about your experiences there. So what was it like working with the internet and the early computers?
My personal experience with early computers was probably in high school, and they were dinosaurs and very, very rudimentary, and a lot of, typing in formulas, and it was definitely not my thing. It was pretty boring if you weren't into plugging in those formulas and calculations to make that computer do what you wanted it to do. It was a world away from what we do now, which is almost brainless.
I can imagine. I mean, I remember those early Mac computers.
Even earlier, go back even farther, where it looked like basically something from, NASA, basically. I mean, it was something so foreign to me. I couldn't, at that point in the 1980s when I was in high school, my brain could not comprehend what we could possibly do with this big clunky box and this green screen. There's no way I could have, at that point, predicted we would be here with a computer in our pocket attached to us all the time.
So let me ask you this. How are you with the computers at that time? Did you get pretty familiarized with them?
Early on, no. I hated it. I saw no sense in it. I didn't see what we could, to me it was like algebra. I just couldn't comprehend what we could possibly do with this. Later on, kind of mid-90s, definitely, it changed rapidly where, you had graphics and, you didn't have to plug in formulas. There were software programs that were already compiled for you and you just had to push some buttons. So it was very different about 10 years on.
Nice. So during that time as well, did you ever meet anybody that worked for the tech company as well?
Well, not during that time. Later on, about 1998 is when I kind of got into that tech, not on the tech side, but it was a tech company. Priceline was a technology company. So that's kind of when I got into that. Prior to that, it was so rudimentary, we just didn't know what it could do. But oddly enough, we had this sense that it was coming. Something was coming. Changes were going to come. And I know there were a lot of people that even back then, say 1989, 1990, and people were writing books about it, that it was going to destroy our lives, that it was going to take over. It was almost a prediction of what we know now as AI, that it was just going to somehow come alive and think for itself far into the future. I don't think we realized how soon it was going to be. We kind of thought it would be way, way off. But around 89 or 90, people were already getting a little almost leery about what computing could eventually do. But I think we were still curious and a little excited about what could be. You had that one side that was just convinced that it was going to destroy us. It's going to destroy us. But you had kind of in your mainstream life, you were thinking it could be really great. Maybe it could cook my dinner. Maybe it could, do all of these things that I don't really want to do. And that was the exciting part. And then there was that other kind of gray area where you were thinking, well, if it could do that, what else will it be able to do? So,
just like you said, like right now with AI.
Yes, and this was, back in 89 or 90, I remember having conversations with people who were really concerned that it would just take over and destroy us at some point,
And will it?
I guess we'll see.
There was how many Terminator movies?
Yeah, I remember when my family bought me a Roomba vacuum cleaner for Christmas. And I remember my son saying, that thing is a Terminator, get it away from me. Because I could program it on my phone and tell it where to go to clean the house. And oddly enough, the gentleman who created that technology was somebody I talked to frequently in my business life. So it just, all roads kind of converged at one point.
That's awesome. Wow, you met a lot of people.
I think the .com world and that whole kind of technology sector was really interesting because you had people that were doing some really dumb stuff, but you had people that were always kind of trying to push the edge of what we knew we could do just a little bit further. And so I wound up meeting probably the most fascinating people I've ever known in that area.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I've met people in that industry that were anything from writers to world-renowned cryptographers who decipher codes. Like, they'll take ancient codes and decipher them. The industry was a mishmash of people from different areas that got into that tech and got into that internet space. So it was pretty fascinating.
So it sounds like the late 90s and early 2000s were very exciting.
Rapid change. Just in the way we did everything. And some fascinating people. Even people who invented things in the 70s were still around and inventing newer things or getting into new spaces with the knowledge that they had. It was quite fascinating. Yeah.
I love technology, and I think it's wonderful that we have it. But I think there are some stuff that is
guardrails.
Yes,
we need guardrails.
Exactly.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think, when it comes to curing diseases and even gene editing, is fabulous. If you could cure or wipe out sickle cell anemia just by turning on or off a gene or editing a gene, wouldn't that be amazing? I think the fear with that is, how far do we let it go? Do we let it change who we are as human beings? I mean, if we could get rid of a terrible disease that kills people, in their prime or before their time, is it great, or are we playing God? Because then where do we take that? Does that go into a eugenics type of situation where we're, looking at weird things like racial purity or purity of a species towards a certain direction? There has to be some guardrails.
I completely agree. We'll see if that ever happens.
We'll see.
And during that time as well, did you ever invest into any of the stocks?
So oddly enough, what started happening once these .com companies got up and running, they got a ton of venture capital money to launch their businesses. Venture capitalists were all in on tech and internet companies. Even kind of a brick and mortar business moving into the internet space to sell their goods and services. So they were just pouring millions and millions, probably billions of dollars into these companies. These companies had a lot of money to attract human capital, employees to their companies. They grew very quickly. They spent a lot of money on hiring people. And one of the draws to hiring people into those internet companies, those tech companies, was stock options. So in my case, I was given a certain amount of stock options. People who were at the company prior to me joining, which was late 98, there were people there that had been building that company for 3 or 4 years. They got stock options as well. There was usually a vesting period. You had usually 3 rounds of stock. And if you were there a certain amount of time, you could cash out, say, 1/3 of your share, your shares. I saw the first round get cashed out. Wasn't mine, but I saw that happen. And so they didn't, lay out money for their stock, but they got it as part of their compensation package. And I saw very quickly what happened to normal people who overnight got a tremendous amount of money. And that was crazy. Did I invest individually? No. I had started talking to an advisor about certain companies that were launching their IPOs, and I thought it was maybe a good deal. Should I invest in this or invest in that? And luckily, the advisor that I had on the phone told me, don't do it. There were a lot of companies that they could already see were overvalued, and that were probably not going to make it in the long run, and they probably weren't wise investment choices. So I didn't at that time. I kind of just sat on the options that I had, and I just kind of waited it out. Plus, at that point, I was a mom of 2 kids, and I didn't have a lot extra to play the market, but I saw a lot of it happen. People were, it was almost like it was what I would think of the roaring 20s, because it was such a boom, and it seemed like any company that went public was just shooting up the market. So at that point, everybody I talked to almost was just, oh, I have a broker now, and I invested, $5,000, or I invested $1,500 in this company and that company. And it seemed like everybody had an IPO. Every company all of a sudden was going public to kind of jump on that boom,
right?
Which was strange to see. It was just chaotic and strange. Everybody was all of a sudden watching the stock market channel on cable TV. I mean, I knew people who had it on while they were working, just to watch that ticker go by, and they were glued to it, like we're glued to TikTok these days, but they were glued to the ticker going across the screen.
You literally covered 3 questions right now.
Oh, well, I mean, it's kind of all encompassing if you think about it.
That's good though.
I've seen people lose their shirts too. So because they invested in, I remember one company in particular, it was called pets.com, and it had some of you that are old enough might remember, they put a lot of these companies spent a lot of their venture capital money on branding, advertising, swag. this company, Pets.com, had a sock puppet as their.
You know what? I feel like I vaguely remember
It was
that.
a sock puppet of a dog.
Yeah.
And they were everywhere. They were like the commercials were just everywhere on the radio, on TV. You're in your car, Pets.com. That company had a lot of people jumping on board to invest. They went bust pretty shortly after. So
much.
I think a lot of people probably got lucky if they were lucky enough to cash out before a bust.
Yeah.
But I mean, to me, that's just either inside information or grace and luck. I don't know.
And I remember seeing the movie not so long ago, but I remember the family was very poor, and they I think their late husband, her woman's late husband, invested in Apple, and then they got a check in the mail for.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but who knew back then what company was going to make it for the long haul, or what was just going to tank? And I think a big problem with a lot of those companies was because of the influx of money they were getting, they spent like the money was never going to run out. These companies paid for island vacations to promote their company. They paid for huge parties that cost, $1 million plus for one night. Priceline had a very big 1-year anniversary party in an airplane hangar in New York State. It was a big deal.
Yeah.
It was a big deal. But Priceline was actually better at their budget and kind of foreseeing what was coming down the road. And I think that was mostly because after my boss had gone on to start another company, a gentleman named Richard Braddock kind of took the helm of the ship. And in his history, he had basically saved a bunch of companies, I believe Citibank being one of them. And so he was much more conservative about the way he did things, and he kind of set it up for the long haul. But most of those companies were just spending like crazy. They were paying huge bonuses, stock options, parties, vacations. The money they spent on just swag, t-shirts, tote bags. I mean, it was ridiculousness. The advertising, ad spots aren't cheap. And those companies that went public really just wanted to get their name out there as much as they could. So they were their ad budget was probably insane, I'm assuming. So that didn't help. You're depleting everything, and the venture capital money is probably not going to keep coming in if your company is not profitable. So it may have looked good on paper. One day you're worth $1 billion, but then as it turns out, that was paper. That wasn't real life. Paper changes, and I saw that happen. Unfortunately, it was crazy. There were a lot of instant millionaires, and there were a lot of overnight paupers as well. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, somebody I worked with at Priceline, we kind of talked about the early days where the early employees started cashing out their options, and who bought a mansion in Northern California, and who was rolling up with a brand new BMW, which was one of the ugliest BMWs I've ever seen, by the way. So that was sad. And he was a young kid. He was probably 22. But he got to cash out his stock options, and they just spent. And this gentleman who was there from almost day one had said to me, that most of them lost it all, right? They're broke. So it happened to the employees too. The stock option plan was great, and it was a little hook or an anchor for people to stay with the company. It was an incentive to work really hard, and they did. At Priceline, a lot of our software engineers and programmers, in the early days weren't even going home. They were sleeping at the office. They would grab, a couple hours sleep, and then hit the system again and keep building it. And we actually had pillowcases that were distributed to everybody that said sleep coming soon, because nobody slept. They were just building and building and building and working so hard. So, they earned the stock options for sure.
Yeah.
They worked really, really hard. But I think especially the younger ones thought that it would go on forever. I think they thought the money would just keep coming. There was no end to it. And there was, unfortunately, yeah.
Almost, was it, a lot of things don't always last forever.
No. I always say there is an end to everything, good or bad.
Yeah.
It's things will. The only thing you're guaranteed is that things will change. So prepare for the change. But I think a lot of those employees were, especially in the, internet world, the tech world. These were really young people. We had older, seasoned people kind of at the top that were leading different divisions of the companies, but a lot of kind of the mainframe employees were very young. And unfortunately, looks like they didn't have the right people guiding them as far as what to do with this newfound wealth.
Yeah.
I mean, it was almost like going to Hollywood and getting discovered, and all of a sudden you have all of this money, and then everybody turned into MC Hammer because they bought gold, water faucet. It was just gone. You weren't going to get a steady round of stock options. You had 3. You're lucky if you could cash out 1 based on the time you were there.
Right.
So yeah, that was really tough to see. But I think we knew when we kind of saw everybody spending and everybody's lives changing, and now people are quitting and they're relocating to California and buying them. That's a little scary.
Would you say all that happening, you see the rise of, what's that city in the
Silicon Valley, yeah.
You think that has something to do with it?
I think, we were based in New York, so it was a little bit different.
Right.
I think what Steve Jobs and Apple as a company had, it at one point you just knew it was going to wind up being an empire.
Mm-hmm.
I think the technology that was being created within Apple was something that other companies had yet to even broach what they were doing. It seemed to me they hired the very best of the best, and they were pushed pretty hard to create, newer and better and faster. And I think they were, at that time, I feel like they were a unicorn. They were a little bit above and beyond what most other companies were doing.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, Lisa. So, looking back, what do you think were the biggest misunderstandings people had about the new tech economy?
I think at the beginning, the big misunderstanding was everybody was going to get rich really fast. Really fast. I think people thought that whatever IPO they were investing in was a sure shot to just, because the market was so crazy, it looked unstoppable. And I feel like people who maybe didn't know better, or maybe just had this magical faith in the market at that time that it would never drop, but it always drops. That whatever they put their money into was going to turn to gold.
Right.
And I think people thought in some ways that some things wouldn't change. I remember doing things in an analog way. I mean, it's just so different now. But even in the middle of that .com boom, we were still doing a lot of things analog. Our files were we were still like heavy use in paper files, having backed up hard copy paper files, having actual filing systems in a drawer where you pull a file.
Yeah.
And I don't think we ever thought that part would really change as quickly as it did. Like even now it's still unsettling to me that we put everything on our computer, on, you know, in a filing system, in a cloud.
Right.
That it still makes me a little stressed out, you know, because I can't physically see it. So I don't think.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
In the bedroom. Thank you. So I think that was kind of what we misunderstood, that we would be so reliant on it for everything. I think we thought a smart house was going to be way far in the future. I don't think we thought we were going to be using it just yet, like all of that. I think it happened way quicker than we thought it would. So,
and it, you know, what do we have now? Alexa.
We have it all.
Right.
But, I mean, yeah, pick a name. You know, I can open my garage door from across town or across the country. How does that, you know, it's still kind of unfathomable to me
Right.
that we aside from the technology itself that blows my mind, the other thing that blows my mind is that we allow it. We're allowing a computer system that could be hacked and controlled by God only knows who. We allow that to plug in to our bank accounts, to our homes, to our, you know, communication systems, to our refrigerators even. You know, there are refrigerators with a camera inside that can tell us when we're at work if we need milk. You know, that to me is still so Jetsons to me. But, you know.
Well, Lisa, it was a pleasure having you here and listening to your story. It's really fascinating. I had no idea that so much happened from 98 to 2008, correct?
Correct. Yes. And I don't think about it all the time. But sometimes something will trigger a memory, and I think to myself, wow, that was pretty crazy. And it was crazy then. To think about where we've come now from there is also crazy. Just the advancements, it'll be really a little unsettling, but also really fascinating to see where we are 10 years from now.
Right.
With everything moving so rapidly.
Right.
Because right now it's I feel like technology right now is at a frenetic pace. Like it's something that most of us kind of can't even keep up with.
Right.
Yeah.
I know, like, real quick, but a couple of weeks, like a month ago, my wife wanted to buy the Samsung refrigerator with the touchscreen.
With the touchscreen. Yes.
And
what's next?
Yeah, exactly.
What's coming around the bend? It makes me think. I feel like I'm lucky to be Gen X because we lived in a time where, you know, our lives started out analog, and we were able to kind of make that switch into technology, and I feel like most of us have kept up pretty darn well.
I think so.
I think for the older folks, a lot of boomers, it's getting harder. I feel like once you've got yourself wrapped around one new thing, you're already 10 steps behind because, you know, tech changes are coming so fast. It's almost dizzying. and I don't know how we're going to keep up, but it will be interesting to see.
Right, exactly.
Like I said, AI is, I think, an entirely different sphere, but I think it's going to wind up integrating into everything. Um, and that just kind of makes me nervous. It's very different. It's a whole different ball game from an, you know, old 1980s dinosaur computer, or even the computers I was using in 2000, 2001. It, you know, I didn't feel like there was an eye on me all the time.
Right.
And so we've come quite a long way, and it's been, I mean, I feel lucky to have seen all of the changes and all of the advancements.
Right.
It's just unsettling to think about where we're going. I hope that we put all of this stuff to really good use. Because if we do it the right way, we could change everything. But is there enough incentive for companies to do that? Because if it's all about the money,
It is.
you know, it just changes things. And I always refer back to Dr. Jonas Salk and the polio vaccine. You know, he discovered something that was going to help humanity, didn't want any money for it, just wanted it pushed out there so that we wouldn't have polio anymore.
Right.
I don't think you're going to get that kind of humanitarianism, maybe a little, with AI. I just don't see it happening on a big scale. I think it will be all about the profit and who can dominate the market for whatever, you know, AI technology they're advancing next. But you never know. Good things can happen. So I mean, I have hope that a lot of good can come out of it. If we can improve life,
Right.
if we can, you know, improve our climate and our air and our water, and, you know, reduce the amount of disease and infections and, you know, transmission of infections or whatever, and save people's lives, wouldn't that be a great thing? You know, and that itself should be great enough. But I guess, like everything, we'll see.
Now, to end it up, the segment, do you have any regrets?
Do I have any regrets? Yeah, I should have bought Apple way earlier. way earlier, probably.
I think a lot of people have the same
Yeah,
sentiment.
yeah. I mean, you know, hindsight is. If we all had, you know, those premonitions of the future and where we were going to go, but like we were saying before, with all of those companies going public and all of that tech and internet stuff happening, you know, throw a dart at the wall. How would you know who is going to stay for the long term? Because a lot of these companies weren't brick and mortar. They weren't Coca-Cola. You know, they weren't, you know, mainstream products that everybody had in their house yet.
Right.
So how would you know? You are literally just hoping, you know. And for some people, it definitely paid off, for sure. And for others, it didn't. But yeah, that's probably my only regret, is that I was very into my job within the company, and I just didn't have the expertise to know how really it worked on the other side of it. You know, I was working within the chairman's office as his executive assistant, so that was my first responsibility. That was my first concern, and not, you know, how was I going to play this market and make a bunch of money. So maybe I could have been more balanced with that and learned a little bit more. But, you know, that taught me a lesson too, because today I'm learning a little bit more about AI and ChatGPT, and so maybe, you know, maybe that kind of stuff will be a little bit of help for me, just because now I'm kind of keen to actually learn more about it. it was not something I really had a huge understanding of. You know, my expertise was running my guy's daily life. So that's really what I was focused on, when I really probably should have been focused on what exactly are they doing? Yeah, so not a lot of regrets, but that's probably one of them.
It's awesome, Lisa.
Yeah.
Well, Lisa, appreciate coming to my little show, my little segment.
Thank you very much for asking me about my career.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Peace out.
That was good.